The Liske family murders Columbus, Ohio on Halloween 2010. 16-year-old Devon Griffin returned home from Sunday church services to find his brother Derek, mother Susan, and Susan's new husband William murdered.
Imagine coming home from church on a quiet Sunday morning, only to walk into a scene so horrific that your mind refuses to accept it as reality. Imagine thinking it's just an elaborate Halloween prank, that any moment now, your family members will jump up and laugh. But they don't. They never will. This is exactly what happened to 16-year-old Devon Griffin on November 1st, 2010, in the small town of Oak Harbor, Ohio. What he discovered inside his family's home that morning would become one of the most chilling family tragedies in Ohio's history. 3 people, 1 home, 1 horrifying night, and a killer who was supposed to be family. Oak Harbor, Ohio, is the kind of place where neighbors know each other's names, where families feel safe, where Halloween decorations line the streets without fear. The Liske family seemed like any other American family trying to build a life together. William Liske Sr., a hard-working man. Susan Liske, a devoted mother. Derek Griffin, a 23-year-old trying to find his way. And Devon, the youngest, still in high school. They had no idea that someone close to them was planning something unthinkable. But there was another person connected to this family. William Liske Jr., known as BJ, the 24-year-old son of William Sr., from a previous relationship. On the surface, he was just another young man, but beneath that surface, something dark was brewing. October 30th, 2010. Just another Saturday before Halloween. BJ Liske spent the day hunting with his father in Carroll County, Ohio. They shared what seemed like a normal father-son bonding experience. They even celebrated with a neighbor that night, the gathering ending just before midnight. Everything appeared normal, peaceful even. Less than 24 hours later, 3 people would be gone forever. What happened in those crucial hours? What could drive someone to commit such unspeakable acts against their own family? And why did a teenage boy have to be the one to discover the aftermath of pure evil? How does a family gathering turn into a crime scene? What signs were missed? Could anyone have prevented what happened that Halloween weekend? And most importantly, what was going through BJ Liske's mind as he carried out his plan? The answers to these questions reveal a tragedy that goes far beyond one terrible night. They expose the devastating consequences of mental illness left unchecked, family tensions left unresolved, and warning signs left ignored. What you're about to hear is the true story of the Liske family tragedy. Every name is real, every date is verified, every detail comes from official records and investigations. This is not a ghost story for Halloween. This is something far more terrifying because it actually happened. William Liske Sr. had worked hard to build a new life after his first relationship ended. Like millions of Americans, he experienced the pain of a relationship that didn't work out, the challenges of co-parenting, and the hope of finding love again. When he met Susan, he believed he had found his second chance at happiness. Susan was a strong woman, a mother herself, who understood the complexities of blended families. She had 2 sons from a previous relationship, Derek and Devon Griffin, who would become part of William's new family. Together, they created what looked like a typical blended American family in Martin, near Oak Harbor, Ohio. They bought a home on Wahl Road, a quiet street where children played outside and neighbors waved to each other. William Sr. worked steadily to provide for his expanded family. Susan managed the household and focused on raising the boys. Derek, her eldest, was finding his way as a young adult. Devon, the youngest, was a good kid involved in church activities, the kind of teenager parents hope to raise. But blended families often come with complications that outsiders don't see. There are loyalties divided between biological parents and step-parents. There are tensions over discipline, attention, resources, and belonging. And in this case, those complications would prove fatal because William Sr. had his own son from before, BJ, who was now 24 years old and struggling to find his place in his father's new life. BJ Liske was not like other young men his age. While his peers were building careers, forming relationships, and establishing independence, BJ seemed stuck. Those who knew him described someone who struggled with basic functioning, someone who seemed disconnected from reality at times, someone who couldn't maintain employment or stable relationships. He had a history of mental health challenges, with some suggesting he may have been dealing with schizophrenia, a severe psychiatric disorder that can cause hallucinations, delusions, and severely disordered thinking. but proper diagnosis and treatment remained elusive. Mental health care in America, particularly in rural communities, is often inadequate. Whether BJ received consistent psychiatric care, whether he took prescribed medications, whether his family fully understood the severity of his condition, these questions would later haunt everyone involved in the case. More concerning was the relationship between BJ and his stepmother, Susan. It was strained at best, hostile at worst. BJ reportedly resented Susan's presence in his father's life. Whether it was jealousy over his father's attention, conflicts over household rules, feeling displaced by Susan's biological sons, or something deeper rooted in his troubled mind, BJ harbored dark feelings towards Susan and her family. Friends and family members would later recall tensions at family gatherings, uncomfortable silences, sharp words exchanged. The feeling that something wasn't quite right when BJ was around. But like many families dealing with difficult dynamics, they tried to keep the peace, to make things work, to hope that time would heal the wounds. These weren't just ordinary family disagreements. This was something far more dangerous simmering beneath the surface. This was resentment building in the mind of someone whose grip on reality was already tenuous, and no one fully recognized how dangerous that combination would become. On what would be their final day together, William Liske Sr. and his son BJ went hunting in Carroll County, about 170 miles from their home. This wasn't unusual. Despite the tensions in the family, William Sr. tried to maintain a relationship with his troubled son. He wanted to be there for BJ, to spend time with him, to be a father. Hunting was something they could do together, an activity that didn't require deep conversation or emotional vulnerability, just shared time in the woods. For a few hours on that October Saturday, it seemed like a normal father-son activity. They tracked game through the autumn woods. They talked about simple things, the weather, the deer they saw, where to set up their positions. They spent time together in the peaceful quiet of nature, far from the tensions of home. It must have seemed to William Sr. like a good day. Like maybe things with BJ were getting better. Like maybe his son was finding some stability. He couldn't have been more wrong. That evening, after returning from the hunt, William Sr. and BJ celebrated with a neighbor. The gathering was unremarkable by all accounts. Conversations flowed about the hunt, about the upcoming Halloween holiday, about ordinary life in small-town Ohio. Everything seemed fine, normal, safe. The celebration ended just before midnight on October 30th, with everyone heading to their respective homes, expecting to wake up the next day and continue with their normal lives. William Sr. had no idea he had just spent his final hours alive. He had no idea that the son he had just spent a peaceful day with in the woods was about to become his destroyer. He went to bed that night, probably feeling good about the time he'd spent with BJ, hopeful about their relationship, completely unaware of the nightmare about to unfold. What happened in the Liske home in the hours after midnight remains partially shrouded in darkness. No one survived to tell the complete story, except BJ himself, and his accounts would be filtered through a severely disturbed mind and the legal system. But investigators would piece together a timeline of terror that unfolded room by room through the quiet house on Wahl Road. Sometime in those dark hours between midnight and dawn, BJ Liske armed himself. He retrieved a .22 caliber rifle, the kind commonly used for hunting small game, and a hammer from somewhere in the house. Then he began moving through the home where his father's new family slept, completely unaware of the danger approaching them. The house was quiet, dark. Everyone sleeping peacefully after an ordinary Saturday. No one heard him coming. No one had any warning that their lives were about to end. William Liske Sr., the father who had just spent a peaceful day hunting with his son, became the first target. In the darkness of that Halloween night, BJ approached his sleeping father with the rifle. Whatever was going through his mind, rage, delusion, hatred, or psychotic break, led him to point that weapon at the man who gave him life. BJ attacked his own father with the rifle, firing multiple shots into his head and face. The violence was extreme, suggesting either overwhelming rage or a complete break from reality. William Sr. likely never knew what was happening. One moment he was sleeping peacefully in his own home. The next moment his life was over, taken by his own son's hands. The man who had tried to maintain a relationship with his troubled son, who had spent that very day trying to bond with him through hunting, was gone. Susan Liske, the stepmother BJ resented so deeply, suffered an even more horrific fate. Before ending her life with the firearm, BJ committed violent crimes against her, assaulting her in ways that investigators would later document as evidence of his complete loss of humanity that night. The investigators would find evidence of these assaults, adding another layer of horror to an already unspeakable tragedy. Whether this violence was driven by the resentment he had harbored against her for years, or whether it was part of some psychotic episode, the brutality showed a complete abandonment of human decency. Susan, who had tried to build a family, who had welcomed William Sr.'s son into her life despite the difficulties, who had probably gone to bed that night thinking about ordinary things like Halloween candy and what to make for breakfast, became a victim of unimaginable cruelty. 23-year-old Derek Griffin had locked his bedroom door that night. Whether he heard something that alarmed him, whether he sensed danger, or whether he just locked his door out of habit, that locked door became the final barrier between him and BJ's rampage. But a locked door couldn't save him from what was coming. BJ broke into Derek's room and used a hammer to inflict severe head injuries that took Derek's life. The young man who should have had his whole life ahead of him, who was just beginning to find his way as an adult, died in his locked bedroom at the hands of someone who was supposed to be family. Derek's locked room, the place where he should have been safest, became his final resting place. 3 members of one household. 3 lives ended. All in one terrible night. A father, a mother, and a son. All gone before the sun rose on November 1st. 16-year-old Devon Griffin had spent the night away, attending church activities. He returned home on Sunday morning, completely unaware of the nightmare waiting inside. When he walked through the door, he saw what looked like Halloween decorations taken too far. Bodies positioned around the house. But these weren't props or pranks. The teenager's mind initially refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. It's Halloween weekend, he thought. This must be some kind of elaborate joke. But the truth slowly, horrifyingly, dawned on him. His mother, his stepfather, his brother, all gone. Devon's 911 call would become part of the official record of one of Ohio's most disturbing family tragedies. When law enforcement arrived at the Liske home on Wahl Road in Martin, they encountered a scene of calculated violence. Evidence was scattered throughout the house. The positioning of the victims, the weapons used, the nature of the attacks. Everything pointed to someone who knew the family, who knew the layout of the home, who had access and opportunity. The investigation quickly focused on one person, William B.J. Liske Jr. Investigators discovered that William Sr.'s white truck was missing from the property. Inside that vehicle, they suspected, was the person responsible for this tragedy. But where had he gone? The answer came quickly. B.J. had fled to Carroll County, to the family's hunting cabin, the same area where he and his father had spent their final hours together just days before. Law enforcement located B.J. at the hunting cabin approximately 170 miles from the crime scene. When they searched the white truck he'd been driving, they found blood evidence and the .22 caliber rifle used in the attacks. The hammer used to harm Derek was discovered back at the house. B.J. Liske was taken into custody without incident. The physical evidence against him was overwhelming, but the question remained, why? As investigators dug deeper, a picture emerged of a young man struggling with severe mental health issues. B.J. had shown signs of potential schizophrenia and other psychiatric conditions. His relationship with his stepmother had deteriorated over time. Whether he had planned the attacks or acted impulsively in some kind of psychotic break remained unclear. But the evidence was irrefutable. DNA evidence, physical evidence, the weapons, the truck, the flight to Carroll County. Everything pointed to BJ as the person responsible for ending 3 lives. Rather than face a trial, BJ Liske made a decision that would seal his fate. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated harm, taking full responsibility for the deaths of his father, his stepmother, and his stepbrother. The court proceedings were relatively brief. The evidence was so overwhelming that there was little room for defense. BJ's mental health history was presented, but it couldn't excuse the magnitude of what he had done. The judge handed down the only appropriate sentence for such horrific crimes: life in prison without the possibility of parole. BJ Liske would spend the rest of his days behind bars, never again to walk free, never again to harm another person. For Devon Griffin, the sole survivor of his immediate family, this brought some measure of closure, but no sentence could bring back his mother, his stepfather, or his brother. Oak Harbor and the surrounding communities struggled to process what had happened. This wasn't a random act of violence by a stranger. This was a family destroyed from within. parents sent their children to school wondering if they truly knew what was happening in their own homes. Neighbors looked at each other differently. The sense of safety that small-town America provides had been shattered. Halloween would never feel the same in Oak Harbor again. The teenage boy who discovered his family's bodies had to find a way to move forward. At just 16 years old, Devon had lost nearly everyone he loved in a single night. The trauma of that discovery, of walking into what he thought was a Halloween prank only to realize it was real, would stay with him forever. But Devon survived. He had to rebuild his life from the ruins of that terrible November morning. His story became one of resilience in the face of unimaginable tragedy. B.J. Liske served his sentence in an Ohio correctional facility. The young man who had destroyed his own family would spend years behind bars, living with the consequences of his actions. According to reports, B.J. Liske eventually passed away while incarcerated, though the exact circumstances and date remain part of the prison record. The person who caused so much pain and suffering was gone, but the scars he left behind remain. This is the question that haunts everyone connected to this case. B.J. Liske had shown signs of mental illness. There were tensions in the family. Were there warning signs that were missed? Could intervention have prevented this tragedy? Mental health experts point to this case as an example of what can happen when psychiatric conditions go untreated or undertreated, when family conflicts are left to fester, when warning signs are ignored or dismissed. The Liske family tragedy left behind lessons about mental health awareness, family dynamics in blended households, and the importance of intervention when someone shows signs of dangerous behavior. 3 people lost their lives. 1 young man lost his entire family. And 1 troubled individual destroyed multiple lives, including his own. This wasn't a ghost story or a Halloween tale. This was real. This happened to real people in a real community. And it serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers come not from strangers in the dark, but from those closest to us. If someone you know shows signs of severe mental health struggles or violent ideation, speak up. Reach out to professionals. Don't wait until it's too late. Share this story to raise awareness about the warning signs of family violence and the critical importance of mental health intervention. Subscribe to stay informed about cases that teach us how to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Together, we can work to prevent tragedies like the Liske family massacre from happening again.